The click of the bedroom door locking behind me was louder than it had any right to be. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, my pillow under one arm and a blanket crumpled in the other, staring at that closed door like it was some kind of monument to failure. It wasn't just a door anymore. It was a boundary, a line drawn in drywall and silence. And I was officially on the other side of it. We used to make love behind that door. We used to laugh. I used to wake up to her curled into my chest, her leg draped over mine like it belonged there. Now I wasn't even allowed in the same bed. The guest room was 10 steps down the hall, but it felt like I was crossing into exile. Each footstep echoed like judgment against the hardwood. I opened the door, flipped on the light, and the unfamiliar glare hit me with an unwelcome starkness. I had barely been in this room in the 5 years since we moved into the house. A treadmill gathered dust in one corner, facing a blank wall. The closet was half full of old winter coats and boxes marked Zmaz stuff. This was not a room made for living. This was a storage unit, a place where things were placed and forgotten. I set the pillow down, straightened the blanket over the twin fucking bed, and sat on the edge with a long exhale. The mattress creaked like it resented me. I ran my hand through my hair and stared at the plain white wall in front of me. How the hell did we get here? We used to be wild for each other. I still remember the early days, the stolen glances across crowded rooms, the teasing touches under tables, the way we used to race home just to tear each other's clothes off like we couldn't wait a second longer. Sex wasn't just routine, it was electric, hungry, desperate in the best possible way. Now my wife flinched when I touched her shoulder. It didn't happen all at once. It started small, a shrug when I reached for her hand, a late night at work that turned into 3, a birthday forgotten, then half-heartedly remembered with a generic card and an apologetic peck. The first time she said, "Not tonight, I'm tired." I didn't think much of it. Everyone gets tired. But then the excuses stacked up like bricks in a wall. Work was stressful. She had a headache. She wasn't in the mood. She just wanted to be alone. Alone became her default setting. At first, I tried. I cooked her favorite meals, bought her flowers, suggested date nights. I even booked a cabin in the mountains last fall, just the two of us. I remember the look she gave me when I brought it up, like I was suggesting we go to a funeral. She muttered something about being too busy and walked out of the room without another word. Last week, I reached for her in bed, just a hand on her hip, nothing more. She recoiled like I'd burned her. "Don't," she whispered, her voice sharp. "Just leave me alone." And that was that. Tonight's fight had started with something small, the thermostat. I turned it down, she turned it back up, and suddenly it spiraled. Accusations about selfishness, about not listening, about never understanding what she needed. She ended it by walking into the bedroom, slamming the door, and locking it behind her. The implication was clear. You don't sleep here anymore. I lay back on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled slightly every time it spun. The silence of the house was suffocating, not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your chest, a silence full of everything that hadn't been said. I heard the creak of the floorboards down the hall, her footsteps, then the soft click of her locking our bedroom door. There it was again, that sound. Final. Cold. So goddamn final. For years, we'd said, "I love you," every night before bed, even on bad days. Now, we didn't even say goodnight. She didn't even look at me as she passed by in the hallway earlier, just brushed past like I was a coat rack. The bed was stiff. The sheets had that slight chemical smell of detergent that hadn't been washed out yet. I shifted under the blanket, but no position felt comfortable. My mind wouldn't shut off. Where had it gone wrong? Was it something I said? Something I did, or didn't do? Or had she just stopped loving me? I tried not to think like that. Tried to remind myself that relationships go through phases. That intimacy fades, but love remains. That stress and kids and aging and the weight of life could build walls, but those walls could be broken down again with time, with effort, with patience. But lately, I was the only one trying. And now I was the one on the outside looking in. The clock on the nightstand blinked 11:47 p.m. in angry red digits. I could still smell her perfume faintly in the hallway. That same soft floral scent she used to wear when we'd go out dancing. I remember how I used to bury my face in her neck, breathing her in, drunk on her touch, her laugh, her moans. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now I was alone, in a guest room, in my own house. The irony was cruel. I paid half the mortgage. I installed the hardwood floor she walked on. I mounted the TV in our room. I built her home office desk by hand. And yet here I was, demoted to a space barely big enough for my dignity. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull and constant, like a bruise that never healed. I wondered if she lay on our bed scrolling through her phone, texting someone else. God, the thought made my chest tighten. Was she talking to someone else? Had she already replaced me in her heart? Or worse, in her bed? I turned over and pressed my face into the pillow, trying to force sleep to come. But it didn't. Only that goddamn silence. And the echo of a locked door behind me. Morning came with the kind of dull, gray light that did nothing to brighten the house or my mood. I woke up sore, my back aching from the guest bed's unforgiving mattress. The blanket had bunched up during the night, and I had kicked off the pillow at some point. My body had slept, barely, but my mind never did. When I stepped into the hallway, our bedroom door was already open. She was gone. Her side of the bed looked perfectly made, untouched, like she'd never even laid in it. Coffee was already brewed downstairs. She'd left it half full in the pot, which felt more like an obligation than a courtesy. 2 mugs sat on the counter, one washed and upside down, the other by the sink with a faint ring of lipstick at the rim. Her signature, deep plum shade. She hadn't worn it in months. Maybe she'd put it on this morning. For someone else? I shook the thought away, but it lingered in the back of my mind like a splinter. The silence in the house was no longer surprising. It had become a second skin, clinging to everything. We still lived together, shared the same roof, the same refrigerator, the same Wi-Fi password, but nothing else. Our conversations had eroded down to logistics, bills, groceries, schedules. She'd text me if she needed something. She never called. We still shared a table at dinner, but rarely at the same time. If we did, it was her scrolling her phone while I stared into my plate, pretending I didn't care that she wouldn't even look at me. Sometimes I'd catch her glance in my direction, brief, cold, assessing, as if she were trying to remember who I used to be. Maybe I was doing the same. The evenings were the worst. She'd retreat to the master bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her like clockwork. I'd sit in the living room, TV on but muted, nursing a beer or two and pretending to be entertained. More than once I found myself rewinding scenes I hadn't even noticed. My mind wasn't in the room. I found myself obsessing over the details. Her new clothes. The way she'd started wearing perfume again. A different scent now. Something lighter, fruitier. She never wore it for me anymore. Maybe she was wearing it for herself. Or someone else. I tried not to go there, but it was impossible. When a woman who used to reach for you in the dark won't even sit next to you on the couch, your mind goes to dangerous places. It had been nearly 3 weeks since she told me to sleep in the guest room. 3 weeks of silence, of cold dinners, of polite, calculated avoidance. 3 weeks of losing someone who was still right there. And in that same stretch of time, her sister started showing up. At first, I didn't think much of it. Rachel had always been close to her. She'd visit every couple months, spend a weekend catching up, helping with errands, making my wife laugh in ways I hadn't managed in years. I used to love seeing them together. Now, it felt different. She had started coming over more frequently, weeknights, not just weekends. At first, it was under the pretense of helping reorganize the pantry or catching up over wine. But last week, she showed up with takeout for 3. Figured you didn't cook tonight, she said, handing me a bag of Thai food with a soft smile. And just like that, she stayed for dinner. The 3 of us sat at the table. Me, the ghost of my wife, and the only woman in the room who seemed remotely alive. Rachel had always been attractive. Maybe I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I had, and buried it deep. Where my wife was elegant and controlled, Rachel was warm, casual, even playful. She joked easily, laughed loudly, and didn't seem to care that the air between her sister and I could be cut with a knife. I caught her watching me a few times. Not in an obvious way, but there were glances. Glances that lingered just a second too long. When I cracked a joke about how the rice was the only thing in the house getting steamed lately, Rachel laughed, and my wife didn't even blink. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't just that Rachel saw me. It was the way she saw me, amused, maybe even intrigued. I hadn't felt that in so long it hit like a shot of whiskey. Dangerous. Warm. Sharp. Later that night, I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when she came in behind me. We were alone, My wife had gone upstairs already, door shut, of course. Rachel stood beside me, too close, her arm brushing mine. "You okay?" she asked, her voice lower than usual. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a weird time." Rachel leaned against the counter, sipping wine from a glass she hadn't set down all night. Her eyes met mine. "She doesn't deserve this version of you," she said, barely above a whisper. I turned to her. "What version is that?" She smiled, slow, amused. "The quiet one. The one who walks on eggshells. You used to be different." I couldn't tell if it was an accusation or a compliment. Maybe both. Her gaze lingered, and for a moment, I felt like I was being studied. Not judged, but seen. Really seen. And then she reached forward and plucked a speck of something off my shirt, her fingers brushing against my chest just long enough to make me forget how to breathe. "Just a crumb," she said, with a smirk. But her eyes said more. I watched her walk out of the kitchen, hips swaying slightly, wine glass still in hand. The next time she visited, I found myself noticing more. The way her dress clung to her hips. The smooth skin of her legs when she crossed them on the couch. The way her laugh curled around the edges of my ears and settled there. It wasn't just me, though. There was something about the way she leaned in when we talked, the way her fingers brushed my arm when she passed by, the occasional wink when my wife wasn't looking. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I wasn't. But once the thought took root, I couldn't shake it. I started looking forward to her visits. I started watching the door, wondering what she'd be wearing, how close she'd sit. I felt alive again, guilty but alive. And that's when I realized just how far gone my marriage really was. That the only spark left in the house wasn't between me and the woman I married. It was coming from the woman who used to be my sister-in-law. The silent house wasn't so silent anymore. And that scared the hell out of me. It was nearly midnight when it happened. The house had long since fallen into that dead kind of silence only found in places where love used to live. The kind that settled in the walls and made every creak of floorboard sound accusatory. I lay in the guest room, sheets kicked off, the dim glow from the hallway bleeding in under the door. I wasn't asleep. I rarely was anymore. I had just closed my eyes when I heard it, the faintest rattle of the doorknob. Not loud, not rushed, almost delicate. I sat up, heart thudding once hard. The door creaked open slowly. And standing there in the dim light, barefoot and wearing a pair of sleep shorts and a loose gray t-shirt that hung off one shoulder, was Rachel. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light. Her hair was messy, lips slightly parted, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. My mind scrambled for an explanation, something rational, something innocent. But then she stepped inside, quietly closing the door behind her. My voice caught in my throat. "Rachel?" She smiled, but it wasn't casual. It was slow, calculated, dangerous. "She's asleep," she said, as if that explained anything. I didn't know what to say. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. My whole body was suddenly alert, like it had been waiting for something it couldn't name. Rachel moved closer, her bare feet whispering across the hardwood floor. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, unsure whether I was about to stop her or beg her not to. Her scent hit me then, something soft and floral, different than her sister's. Warmer, real. She stood directly in front of me now, looking down at me in the glow of the night light behind her. I could see the curve of her hips beneath the loose fabric, the smooth skin of her thighs, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, a little quicker now. "Rachel," I said again, softer this time. "What are you doing?" She leaned down, slow and deliberate, until her face was inches from mine. I could see the speck of gold in her hazel eyes. "If she won't touch you," she whispered, her voice like velvet, "I will." I stared at her, stunned. My mind felt like it had been dropped into ice water and set on fire at the same time. Her hand brushed the back of my neck. Just once, barely a touch. And then she leaned closer, her lips hovering right at my ear. "Let's go upstairs," she said, her breath hot against my skin. "My room." Time stopped. I didn't move. Couldn't. Her words hung in the air, echoing louder than they should have. "Let's go upstairs." She straightened slowly, her fingers trailing down the front of my t-shirt, pausing for a second just over my chest, as if testing the rhythm of my heartbeat. And then she turned and walked to the door. Her hand touched the knob. She looked over her shoulder, meeting my eyes one more time. "I'll leave the door open," she said. And just like that, she slipped out into the hallway and disappeared. I sat there, breathing hard, hands curled into fists at my knees. What the hell just happened? I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't misreading anything. She had offered herself, not in a coy, teasing way, but boldly, directly. She knew what she was doing. And she wasn't drunk. She was calm, clear-eyed, certain. For a moment, I just stared at the door. It was still ajar. Not wide, but open enough to tempt. 1,000 thoughts collided in my head. This was insane. Irreversible. My wife was asleep down the hall, or maybe pretending to be. Rachel was her blood. Her sister. This would be betrayal at a level I didn't even have a name for. And yet, it wasn't like I didn't want it. The hunger I felt in that moment, the raw, aching need for someone to want me, to see me, to touch me, had been buried so deep, for so long, it had started to rot. Rachel had dug it up in a single sentence. I stood up without thinking. My feet carried me to the door as if they didn't belong to me anymore. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. The air out there felt charged, heavy. The hardwood was cool beneath my feet. The house was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the fridge downstairs. At the far end of the hallway, Rachel's bedroom door was cracked open. Warm yellow light spilled out, soft and inviting. I took a step toward it, then another. Each footstep echoed louder in my ears than it had any right to. My throat was dry. I wasn't breathing. I paused at the halfway mark, glancing back at the master bedroom door. Her door, closed tight. No light coming from underneath. No sign of life. Or love. Had there ever been? I turned back toward the open door. And then I heard it. Faint. Unmistakable. Rachel's voice. "Are you coming?" she whispered. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, a mix of challenge and promise. Like she already knew the answer. And maybe she did. I stood frozen, every nerve ending lit up like Christmas. I could turn around right now. Pretend it never happened. Blame the hour, the loneliness, the madness of a failing marriage. But I didn't move. Her door waited, open. Her silhouette flickered briefly in the warm light, then vanished again. The whisper stayed behind. "Are you coming?" I swallowed hard and took another step forward. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I stood outside Rachel's door, wrestling with guilt, with shame, with a sudden, overwhelming urge to do the right thing. But I didn't. My hand touched the doorframe, then pushed the door open without another thought. My body had made the decision before my conscience could catch up. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, one leg folded under her, the other hanging over the side, toes brushing the hardwood. The lamp beside her cast a golden glow over her bare legs, up the smooth skin of her thighs, where her shorts had ridden up just enough to turn my breath shallow. That oversized shirt, the same one from earlier, now hung even looser, the neckline slipping just enough to reveal the smooth slope of her shoulder and a teasing glimpse of cleavage. Rachel looked at me like I was the last man on earth. And I, like a fool starving for affection, stepped inside and closed the door behind me. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I stood there, still halfway dressed in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, feeling like I'd stumbled into a dream I wasn't supposed to be part of. My heart pounded as she slowly got up, walking toward me with that same deliberate grace she always carried. Rachel wasn't showy about it. There was nothing forced or exaggerated in her movements. She simply moved, and the air seemed to notice. She stopped in front of me and looked up, her face unreadable. Then she reached up, slid her fingers into my hair, and kissed me. It was soft at first, curious, testing. My hands found her waist, tentative at first, then more sure as the kiss deepened. Her mouth opened against mine, and I tasted heat, hunger, something wild that had been kept caged for too long. She pressed into me, her chest flattening against mine, her hips tilting forward just slightly, just enough to let me know this wasn't a tease. It was an invitation. I pulled her closer, one hand sliding under her shirt to the small of her back. Her skin was warm, impossibly smooth, and when she sighed into my mouth, my restraint began to unravel. Her hands slid down my sides, pulling at the hem of my shirt, lifting it up and over my head in one smooth motion. Her fingertips traced across my chest, lingering as she looked at me like I was something she had been craving for years. When she spoke, her voice was low, confessional. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this." I should have stopped her right then. Should have asked what the hell she was doing. Why now? Why me? But I didn't. Because the truth is, I wanted this too. More than I was ready to admit, even to myself. I hadn't been touched like this in years. Not by my wife. Not by anyone. And now, here was Rachel, her lips on my neck, her hands exploring like she had every right to, giving me what I had been starving for. Affection, desire, recognition. I pushed her gently back onto the bed, our mouths never parting. The shirt slid off her shoulder, then down her arms, tossed to the floor without ceremony. Her bra was simple, black lace, understated, but the way her chest rose and fell beneath it as she looked up at me made it feel like the most erotic thing I'd ever seen. She reached for me, pulling me down to her, and in the next few seconds, we crossed a line neither of us would ever uncross. Our clothes came off in a flurry of whispered curses and stolen glances. When I slid between her legs, the tension that had lived between us for weeks, maybe longer, finally snapped. We moved like we were making up for lost time. For all the nights I'd slept alone, all the mornings I'd woken up wondering what I'd done wrong, all the times my wife turned her back to me in bed. With Rachel, there was no hesitation. She wanted me. And God, I wanted her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was two people tearing into each other like oxygen after drowning. Her nails raked down my back. My mouth found her neck, her collarbone, her breast, and she moaned into the crook of my neck like she didn't care who heard. The room felt alive. Electric. Sacrilegious. And for the first time in so long, I felt like a man again, not a ghost haunting his own life. Afterward, we lay in silence. Our bodies tangled, skin still slick with sweat, breathing slowly returning to normal. I stared at the ceiling, the fan spinning above us like a slow, silent witness. That's when the guilt crept in. Not regret. Not yet, but guilt. The cold, familiar whisper reminding me of what I'd just done. Who I'd done it with. That beyond that door, just down the hallway, my wife lay sleeping in the bed we used to share. Rachel rested her head on my chest, tracing slow circles on my stomach with her finger. She said nothing. Neither did I. I could still taste her on my lips. Still smell her perfume on the sheets. Still feel the curve of her body burned into my memory like a brand. This was wrong. But God help me, it felt so right. Eventually, she lifted her head and looked at me. No regrets? She asked softly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied her. The way her hair clung to her cheek, the faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth, the light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I don't know yet, I said. She leaned in and kissed me, slow and lingering. I don't regret a thing, she whispered. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. The new kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that comes after everything changes. There's a specific kind of guilt that follows you like a shadow. You don't see it right away, not in the soft light of morning, not when you're brushing your teeth or brewing your coffee. But it lingers, in the spaces between silence, in the eyes you avoid, in the footsteps you pretend not to hear behind closed doors. I didn't sleep the rest of the night after Rachel. I lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling while she curled into me like it was the most natural thing in the world. She fell asleep easily. Her breathing slowed, her body warm against mine. I should have left. I thought about it a dozen times, slipping out, sneaking back to the guest room, pretending like it hadn't happened. But I didn't move. I watched the sun rise through her window, watched it paint her bare shoulder gold, and felt my stomach twist with a cocktail of hunger and shame. By the time I finally left her room, the house was quiet. My wife had already gone to work. The only evidence that morning had come at all was the fresh pot of coffee she always brewed before leaving. I stood in the kitchen, pouring myself a mug, wondering if she had any idea. If she sensed it. Could she feel that something had shifted? Could she smell her sister on me? I showered twice that day. Once before work, and again after I got home, as if water could wash off what I'd done. But it didn't. It only made me cleaner. Not better. From that point on, my life split cleanly in two. By day, I was still the ignored husband. Quiet, steady, harmless. I went to work, paid bills, mowed the lawn, fixed the leaky faucet she kept reminding me about. We barely spoke unless it was about something practical, and even then, her tone was flat, detached. One night at dinner, she asked if I could start handling the grocery shopping on Wednesdays. I said yes. She nodded, barely looking up from her phone. That was the entire conversation. We used to talk about everything. Now, we didn't even talk about anything. By night, I lived a second life, one wrapped in sheets and whispers, in stolen kisses and silent footsteps. Rachel would knock once, softly, or I'd hear her door creak open and see her standing there in the dark, her hair down, a look in her eyes that made everything else disappear. Sometimes she came to me. Sometimes I went to her. The danger made it addictive. Every brush of skin, every muffled gasp, every time we had to silence ourselves with a hand over the mouth or a bite on the shoulder, it was fire. Reckless, selfish fire. And I kept walking into it, knowing exactly how it would burn. But I couldn't stop, because for the first time in years, I felt wanted. Not tolerated, not ignored, but truly, achingly desired. Rachel didn't just reach for me in the dark. She pulled me in like she'd been waiting her whole life. And I gave in, over and over. I told myself it wouldn't last, that it was just a phase, a reaction to the years of coldness from my wife, a way to feel human again. I told myself that we'd stop before it got worse, before someone noticed, before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But the line was already behind us, and each night we pushed further into the shadows. We were careful, at first. We kept our interactions limited to quiet moments, never touching in public, never letting our eyes linger too long if my wife was in the room. But secrets rot over time, and it didn't take long before the cracks began to show. One night, we were sitting in the living room, all three of us. Rachel had come over for dinner, bringing wine and that easy charm that made her presence feel effortless. My wife barely spoke, scrolling on her phone while Rachel and I shared inside jokes. We laughed too hard at something stupid, something small, but it was the kind of laugh that made people look. I caught myself staring at her lips as she drank. She caught me watching. Later, when I stood up to grab another bottle of wine, Rachel reached out and touched my arm as I passed. Just a second, maybe less, but my wife noticed. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence grew colder. Her eyes narrowed. She left the room 10 minutes later without a word. And Rachel? She just smiled at me like it was a game. Like she wanted to get caught. Another night, after one of our late rendezvous, Rachel curled into me in the dark and whispered, "She doesn't see you." Her breath was hot against my collarbone. I do. I didn't know what to say. I kissed her instead. That became the rhythm of our nights. One part desire, one part desperation. She began to text me when she wasn't at the house. Simple messages at first. Still thinking about last night. You're mine tonight. I wish she knew what she was wasting. I deleted every one, but they lingered in my mind. One afternoon, I came home early from work. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed air. I walked in through the garage, thinking the house would be empty, and found Rachel in the kitchen, alone, pouring herself a glass of wine. She turned, surprised, then smiled. "Didn't expect you," she said. "I didn't expect to be here," I replied. We stood there, 10 feet apart, the tension thick enough to taste. "I missed you," she said quietly. I glanced toward the hallway. She could walk in. Rachel tilted her head. Would that really change anything? I didn't answer, because she was right. What we were doing was wrong, unforgivable, and yet, I couldn't imagine stopping. That night, she wore red, a silk camisole that clung to her hips like a second skin. She waited for me in her room, door barely cracked, the scent of her perfume already pulling me in before I even reached the threshold. As I closed the door behind me, the guilt didn't even try to stop me. Not anymore, because I had already become two people. And the man who walked into her room each night wasn't the same man who sat alone at the dinner table, wondering when his wife had stopped loving him. One man was dying. The other was finally alive. It was inevitable. Secrets rot, but they also leak. One careless glance, one too long silence, one breath caught at the wrong time. And suddenly, things that used to be invisible start taking shape in the shadows. The first real shift came on a Thursday night. Rachel had stayed later than usual. Too late. My wife was upstairs reading, though I hadn't seen her crack open a book in weeks. Rachel and I sat in the kitchen, pretending to watch a cooking show on her tablet, but we weren't paying attention. Our knees brushed under the table. She kept licking the rim of her wine glass. Her foot had slowly, deliberately crept across the tile to rest against mine. I didn't move. Then the floor creaked. My wife was standing in the hallway, just far enough to pretend it was coincidence, just close enough to hear the quiet, or too quiet, tones of our conversation. She didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps too slow to be casual. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I pulled it away. The game was no longer safe. That night, she didn't come to my room. And for the first time in weeks, I couldn't sleep without her. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above, wondering what my wife had heard, or more importantly, what she thought she had heard. I could feel it now, the shift, the subtle tightening of her presence in the house, like a net being drawn slowly around me. She started watching me more carefully, asking oddly specific questions. "Did you sleep okay last night?" she'd ask, her eyes narrow, tone laced with something that sounded suspiciously like accusation. "I didn't hear you come up," she'd mention, as she loaded the dishwasher. Or, worse, the sudden nothingness, the way she'd stop talking mid-sentence when I entered the room, how she stopped leaving her phone out in the open, how she started locking her bedroom door again, even during the day. She was onto something. She just didn't know what. Yet. And Rachel? She got bolder. One morning, as I stood in the kitchen in nothing but sweats, sipping coffee, she walked in still wearing the oversized t-shirt from the night before, my t-shirt. Her hair was a mess, no bra, eyes sleepy but satisfied. She didn't even flinch when my wife walked in and paused mid-step. Rachel just smiled. "Morning," she said, her voice honey-sweet. My wife's eyes locked on the shirt. And I swear something flickered, rage, maybe, or disgust, but it vanished too fast. She poured herself a coffee, said nothing, and walked out. Rachel looked at me with a smirk that both thrilled and terrified me. "You like living dangerously, don't you?" she whispered. That night, she didn't wait until the house was asleep. She came to me early, as I stood in the guest bathroom, brushing my teeth. She slid behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and kissed the back of my neck. "I want you now," she whispered. I turned, startled. She's still awake. Rachel didn't care. She doesn't come downstairs anymore. You know that. She just floats around up there like a ghost. "She's not a ghost, Rachel. She's mine. She's not yours anymore," she cut in, stepping back, hurt flashing across her face. "She gave you up. I just picked up the pieces." Her words were like a slap. I should have stopped it right there. Pushed her away. Ended the madness before it collapsed on all of us. But I didn't. Because the part of me that still clung to guilt was losing. The part of me that needed to feel seen, touched, heard, wanted, was louder now. Hungrier. So I pulled her in and kissed her hard. We didn't even make it upstairs. We fucked against the wall of the guest bathroom. Hurried, messy, half-dressed, and every gasp, every moan we tried to stifle made the risk more electric. Afterward, she slipped out barefoot, giggling under her breath. I stood alone, staring into the mirror. My reflection looked like someone I didn't recognize. My face was flushed, my hair a mess. My eyes, they weren't dead anymore. They were alive. Twisted, but alive. The fallout began the next evening. I came home to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in one hand, a glass of wine in the other. She didn't look up as I entered. "You left your shirt in Rachel's room," she said flatly. My stomach dropped. "What?" She set her wine glass down and looked at me, eyes sharp, voice cold. "I found it on her bed when I went looking for the laundry basket." I opened my mouth, closed it again. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to lie? Or do you want to tell me the truth now and save us both the performance?" I said the only thing I could say. "I don't know what you're talking about." She let out a small, joyless laugh and stood up, brushing past me. That's what I thought. The game had changed. No more passive silence. No more sidelong glances. She wasn't suspicious anymore. She was waiting, watching, letting the evidence pile up. And still, Rachel didn't care. She'd started leaving things in plain sight. Her earrings on my nightstand, a smudge of lipstick on my coffee mug. She'd walk a little too close when my wife was in the room, stand a little too long at the top of the stairs wearing just a towel. She wanted to be seen, and I was too weak to stop her. One night, we sat on the couch, all three of us again, watching some god-awful drama, pretending to be a family. My wife on one end, Rachel on the other. I sat between them, acutely aware of both. Rachel slowly ran her foot up the inside of my leg. My wife turned and asked, "Did you remember to schedule the termite inspection?" I stammered a yes, my voice cracking just enough to betray me. Her smile was slow, cruel. "Oh," she said. "You've been forgetting a lot of things lately." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I knew she knew. And worse, I knew it wouldn't be long before she proved it. The shadows were slipping, and everything we'd buried in the dark was about to come into the light. It was raining the night Rachel finally said it. Not a dramatic downpour, no thunder, no lightning. Just a steady, persistent tapping against the windows, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. And something did. She came to my room later than usual. I'd been lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my nerves twisted into knots. Everything had started to feel tighter, like the walls were closing in. My wife hadn't said a word in 2 days. Not a single word. Not, "Good morning." Not, "Can you grab milk?" Not even the perfunctory sarcasm she'd come to favor in recent weeks. Just silence. Rachel slipped into the guest room barefoot, wearing a long t-shirt and nothing else. Her hair was damp. She smelled like rain and warm skin. I sat up as she approached, but something about her felt different tonight. Less teasing, more vulnerable. "Hey," I whispered. She didn't say anything, just climbed into bed beside me and pressed her face into my chest. I held her body warm against mine, her breath shallow. "You okay?" I asked. She didn't respond right away. Her fingers trailed absently across my stomach, like she was drawing invisible shapes there. Then, softly, "I can't do this much longer." My heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" Rachel looked up at me, and for the first time since this all began, she looked scared. Not guilty, not seductive, just scared. "I don't want to be your secret anymore." The words landed like a gut punch. I didn't know what to say. She sat up slightly, pulling the blanket with her, her face half lit by the glow of the hallway nightlight. "I didn't plan for this," she said. "I didn't come here thinking this would happen. I didn't even mean for the first night to go that far. But it did. And now, every time I walk into this house, I feel like I'm walking into something that's already burning down." She paused, then laughed bitterly. "But the crazy thing is, I'm not sorry." I stayed silent, waiting for her to finish. "I know I should be," she went on, "but I'm not. Because I want you. I don't care if it makes me the villain. I'm tired of sneaking, of acting like what we have is just about sex." Her voice cracked slightly. "It's not just sex." She looked me dead in the eyes. "I'm falling for you." The room went still. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My brain short-circuited, caught somewhere between panic and a strange, painful relief. Because she had just said the thing I'd been trying not to say. The thing I'd shoved down night after night, afraid that once it was spoken, it would become real. But now it was real, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I ran a hand through my hair, suddenly aware of how naked we both were, not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't a hookup. It hadn't been for a long time. We were past that now. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere messier. "I care about you," I finally said. "More than I should." Rachel gave a sad smile. "More than she does." That hit harder than I expected. I pulled away slightly, sitting up beside her. The rain outside picked up, a soft hiss against the windows. "She's still my wife." "Verily," Rachel whispered. I looked at her sharply, but she didn't back down. "She stopped being your wife the day she locked you out of your own room and started treating you like a stranger. Don't give me the morality speech now, not after everything." There was bitterness in her voice, but under it pain. Real, raw pain. "Do you love her?" she asked. I hesitated too long. Rachel nodded like she already knew the answer. "She doesn't love you," she said quietly. "At least not in the way you deserve." I wanted to argue, to defend the woman I married. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I didn't believe them anymore. "She won't change," Rachel added. "Even if this ends. Even if you stop seeing me. She won't wake up one day and suddenly remember how to want you again." She leaned in, touching her forehead to mine. "But I do. I see you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've always seen you." I closed my eyes, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. She kissed me then, soft, slow, with a kind of sadness that tasted like goodbye. But it wasn't goodbye, because after that night, the affair stopped being about escape. It became something else. She started texting me during the day. Just little things. "Missed waking up next to you. I want to fall asleep in your arms tonight. I think about you all the time." And I found myself responding faster. Longer messages. More open. More dangerous. We started meeting outside the house. Lunch breaks. Parking lots. Even once in the back seat of her car behind an abandoned church on the edge of town. It was reckless, insane, but I couldn't help myself. Because it felt like love. Twisted, selfish love, born in betrayal, fed by secrecy, but love all the same. The guilt didn't disappear. It just dulled, became background noise. Until one night, Rachel looked at me from across the bed and said, "You're going to have to choose." And I knew she was right. The double life couldn't last forever. And the time was coming when everything would shatter. It was bound to happen. We'd been walking the edge of a knife for weeks, and the sharper it got, the more reckless we became. Maybe we thought we were invisible. Maybe we were too drunk on desire to care. But danger doesn't wait forever. It creeps. And that night, it didn't just creep, it kicked the door in. It started like every other night. My wife was in bed early, the door shut, lights off by 10. Rachel had stayed late again, supposedly helping with meal prep for the weekend. She wore leggings and a hoodie, something casual, unremarkable. But I knew what was underneath. I always knew. At midnight, I heard the quiet knock on my door, our secret signal. I opened it to find her standing there barefoot, lips parted, eyes dark with want. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I pulled her inside, and our mouths found each other like magnets. There was no slow build-up that night. No teasing. Just raw, urgent hunger. I yanked the hoodie over her head, my hands roaming her body like I'd die if I didn't feel every inch. Her fingers slid under my shirt, her breath hot against my neck. But that night, for some reason, we didn't stay in my room. Rachel grabbed my hand and whispered, "Come upstairs." I froze. "Are you serious?" "She's asleep. It's too risky. She's been asleep for an hour. She won't wake up." I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But her mouth was already on mine again, her fingers already tugging at the waistband of my sweats, and reason was a distant echo. We crept up the stairs like thieves. Rachel's room was dark, but she lit a candle, just one, and the flicker of it made the whole scene feel illicit, cinematic. She climbed onto the bed slowly, pulling her shirt over her head, revealing the soft rise of her breasts and the curve of her hips. "I want you here," she whispered. I was already moving before she finished the sentence. We tried to be quiet. We really did. But the mattress creaked, the headboard tapped gently against the wall. Her gasps were muffled in my shoulder, my name caught in her throat more than once. Then, halfway through, it happened. A sound. Footsteps. My body froze. Rachel's eyes flew open. The floorboard just outside the room gave a familiar groan. A sound I'd heard 100 times, always signaling someone headed toward the bathroom or downstairs for water. But this time, it felt like a hammer against my chest. We didn't speak. We didn't breathe. Rachel grabbed the blanket, pulled it over us. Another creak. This one closer. The hallway. I slid off the bed in a rush, heart racing so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I grabbed my pants, no time for a shirt, and ducked into her bathroom, the small door barely closing behind me. From inside, I could hear her breathing fast, trying to calm herself. The candle flickered, casting shadows on the floor through the bottom of the door. And then, a knock. My wife's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Rachel." Silence. Rachel cleared her throat. "Yeah. You okay?" "Yeah. Just getting ready for bed." A pause. "Did you hear something?" I could hear Rachel's brain working. "No," she said. "Just me." "Why?" Another pause. Then my wife said, "Nothing. Thought I heard footsteps." Rachel didn't respond. The floor creaked again, retreating this time. Back down the hall. Back to her room. I didn't move for a full minute. Maybe longer. When I finally emerged, Rachel was sitting on the bed, hair tousled, skin flushed, the blanket still clutched around her chest. "That was too close," she whispered. "No shit," I breathed. She started to laugh, softly, nervously, but I didn't. It wasn't funny. It was terrifying. I sat down beside her, rubbing a hand over my face. "She knows something. She suspects," Rachel said. "But she doesn't know. Not yet." We didn't have sex again that night. We didn't touch. We lay in the dark, side by side, barely speaking. For the first time since this started, the thrill was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I couldn't get the sound of my wife's voice out of my head, or the way she paused before walking away, like she knew someone was in the room, like she was waiting for a slip, and we almost gave it to her. In the days that followed, everything changed. Rachel pulled back. Not emotionally, but physically. No more late-night visits. No more flirty texts. We went from burning to simmering, the heat still there, but tightly controlled. It made the craving worse, made the silence heavier. One afternoon, she cornered me in the garage while my wife was upstairs on a work call. She pressed her body against mine, kissed me hard, then pulled back just as fast. "This is torture," she whispered. "I know, but we can't keep tempting fate." "I know." She looked up at me with those big, hazel eyes, still smudged with guilt and desire. "I'm scared," she said. "I don't want this to blow up in our faces." "It already is," I said, and we both knew it. The house felt different after that. Every noise was a potential discovery. Every glance from my wife felt like a test. She watched us more closely now. Her questions were sharper, less casual. "Have you seen Rachel today? Did you two go out for lunch again? What were you doing upstairs the other night?" She didn't accuse. She observed. She logged every word, every silence, every flicker of hesitation. And I knew. It was only a matter of time before observation turned to confrontation. Rachel felt it too. One night, as we stood in the kitchen alone, she whispered, "We're not going to get away with this forever." "No," I agreed. "We're not." She took my hand, just for a second. "If it comes down to it," she said softly, "I won't deny it. I'm done pretending this is nothing." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't just scared anymore. She was ready, ready to be found out, ready to face it, ready to force the truth into the light. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not for the fire that was coming. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the hallway, arms folded across her chest, the bedroom door open behind her like the mouth of a cave, and said the one thing I'd been dreading since this began. "How long has it been going on?" That was it. No preamble. No games. Just 4 words that detonated the entire illusion we'd been pretending to live under. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. I hadn't even made it to the kitchen. My heart pounded in my ears so loudly that I barely heard myself say the dumbest possible thing. "What are you talking about?" She laughed. Not a real laugh. A hollow, cruel thing. "Please. I'm not stupid." I didn't answer. Couldn't. "Do you think I don't hear it?" she asked, stepping forward. "Do you think I don't feel it when I walk into a room and you two go quiet? You won't even look at me anymore." And she stopped pretending. The look in her eyes was colder than I'd ever seen. "I've known for weeks. But I gave you a chance to come clean. Every time I asked you a question, every time I opened the door a little, you lied to my face." Silence. Then she said something that actually hurt. "You didn't even have the guts to cheat alone. You had to do it with her. My sister." I looked away. "You want to tell me how that started? Was it a mistake? A drunken accident? Did she crawl into your bed by accident one night?" Still, I said nothing. The weight of it all, the guilt, the secrecy, the fear, it crushed any words I might have formed. She shook her head slowly. "You disgust me," then turned and walked back into the bedroom. The door slammed shut. And just like that, it was over. The pretending, the hiding, the silence. Everything we had been burying under polite dinners and locked doors, it was all laid bare now. Rachel came home an hour later. She saw me standing in the living room, still frozen in place. Her smile faded as soon as she looked at me. "What happened?" she whispered. "She knows." Rachel's face paled. What did she say?" She asked how long it's been going on. Rachel sat down slowly, her fingers twisting around themselves. "She didn't yell?" "No." "Did you tell her?" I shook my head. Rachel looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You should have." That stopped me. She stood and crossed the room to me. Her eyes were wide, glassy, her lips parted like she was fighting a dozen emotions at once. "You should have told her. Weeks ago. Hell, months ago. Before it got to this point." "You think she would have handled it better if I told her sooner?" "No. I think we would have handled it better. I wouldn't have spent the last 2 months wondering if I was just some mistake you were too ashamed to admit." Her voice cracked on the last word. I stepped toward her. She didn't back away. "This wasn't a mistake," I said. "You weren't a mistake." She looked up at me, searching. "You say that now. But what are you going to say when the house burns down? When she tells the family? When your friends find out you slept with her sister?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. For the first time since it began, I was forced to see it not through the lens of passion, or revenge, or desire, but truth. We hadn't just crossed a line. We had demolished it. And now there was no going back. Rachel sat on the couch, pulled her knees to her chest, and stared into space. She's going to tell everyone, isn't she? Probably. She nodded slowly. Good. I'm tired of hiding. That surprised me. I want it out, she said. Let them hate me. Let them call me names. I don't care. She turned to me, eyes raw. I need to know that this wasn't just about her rejecting you. That it wasn't just a reaction. It wasn't, I said. At first, maybe. But not anymore. Then prove it. I swallowed. How? Choose me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Not in a desperate, begging way. She wasn't pleading. She was giving me an out. Or a way forward. But I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not when the wreckage was still fresh. That night, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. Every room held a secret. Every step I took echoed too loud. I sat alone in the dark for hours, turning over everything in my head. My marriage wasn't a marriage. Hadn't been for a long time. I'd been sleeping in a spare room for months. We hadn't had sex in over a year. We barely spoke. But still, she was my wife. And Rachel made me feel like a man again. Like I was worth touching, worth loving, worth fighting for. But now I had to decide if I was ready to burn the last of what remained. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found my wife sitting at the table. She didn't look up. There's coffee, she said flatly. Not for you. I poured a glass anyway. She finally looked up. She's still here. Yes. Of course she is. I sat across from her. We need to talk. She laughed once, bitter and dry. Now you want to talk? I'm not here to defend what I did. Good. Because you can't. I nodded. But I'm also not here to apologize for falling for someone who actually saw me. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you dare make you the victim. I'm not. I'm just saying, you locked me out of your life long before Rachel ever stepped in. We sat in silence after that. The only sound was the faint clink of her spoon stirring her coffee. And I realized then, there was no fixing this. Not the marriage. Not the betrayal. Not the fracture in the foundation of everything we used to be. Rachel was right. The turning point wasn't coming. It had already passed. And all that was left now was the fall. I don't know what I expected. Maybe quiet resignation. Maybe an eventual separation, drawn out through months of awkward avoidance. But I was stupid to think the truth would simply settle. It didn't. It detonated. It happened 3 days later. The calm before it was deceptive, a kind of eerie, stretched silence, like the air before a thunderstorm. My wife hadn't spoken to me since the kitchen conversation. She moved around the house with robotic precision, eyes hollow, her footsteps sharp and measured. Rachel, meanwhile, stayed away. No texts. No late-night visits. Just distance, the kind that lets a bomb ripen. The explosion came one evening, just past sunset. My wife had just returned from somewhere. I didn't ask where. She walked into the living room, dropped her keys on the counter louder than necessary, then stood in the doorway like she was waiting for something. Where is she? She asked. I looked up from the couch. Rachel. She rolled her eyes. Don't play dumb. Is she coming tonight? No. Pity. I was hoping she would. Her tone was different. Not flat. Not sad. Coiled. What's going on? I asked. She stepped into the living room slowly, like a predator circling prey. Then, with one breath, she said it. I told our parents. I blinked. What? I told them. Mom, Dad. Her side too. Everyone knows now that you two have been screwing behind my back in the same house where I sleep. I stood up. You didn't. I did. Oh, and I showed them the texts. My blood ran cold. What text? She smirked. Rachel wasn't as careful as she thought. Left her iCloud logged in on the family iPad last time she stayed the weekend. Took screenshots of everything. Your little, I miss the way you taste message. Very poetic. Really made an impression on my mother. I could hardly breathe. You went through her messages? Oh, spare me. Don't pretend this is about privacy. You were fucking my sister. In my house. She was shouting now. The fury finally finding its voice, rising like a wave. I gave you years, and you gave me silence. And when I finally shut you out for good, instead of ending things like a man, you just slipped into her bed. Her hands were trembling. Her face flushed with rage and heartbreak. Do you know what it's like, she said, her voice cracking, to hear your own sister tell you she loves your husband? I didn't respond. I couldn't. She stepped closer. She came to me. Today. Told me everything. Told me she wants you. That she's in love with you. And you know what? Her laugh was dry, venomous. She's not sorry. I sat back down slowly, as if that would somehow anchor me. She said she'd been waiting for me to stop pretending, that I had my chance and I wasted it, that you belonged to her now. I buried my face in my hands. She said it like it was a gift she was giving me, like she was doing me a favor. The room was spinning. What do you want me to say? I asked quietly. She stared at me, eyes shining. Say nothing. You've already said enough. She walked away then, not to her room, but to the front door. Threw it open. And there, standing on the porch like a twisted omen, was Rachel. Hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes rimmed red. She looked from me to her sister, then stepped forward. My wife held up a hand. Don't. I just want to talk. No. You've done enough. Rachel's jaw tensed. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But it did, my wife snapped. You had options. He had options. You chose to betray me in the most personal, humiliating way possible. Rachel stepped into the house anyway. You never loved him. Not really. I married him, and then you abandoned him. You think that justifies what you did? I think it explains why he came to me. They were inches apart now. The air between them crackled. Do you love him? My wife asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. Yes. My wife turned to me. And you? I stood there, both women waiting, the wreckage of everything I once called home smoldering at my feet. I don't know, I said. I think I do. Wrong answer. Rachel looked crushed. My wife scoffed. Pathetic, she muttered. You don't deserve either of us. Then, to Rachel, you want him? Take him. I'm done. She turned and walked upstairs. This time, the door didn't just shut, it slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Rachel and I stood alone in the echo. She looked at me like she wanted me to chase after her, not my wife, but her. But I just stood there, frozen. This isn't how I wanted it, she said softly. I nodded. Me neither. She stepped closer, took my hand. But we're here now. I looked around the house, the living room still littered with framed memories. Our wedding photo still hanging over the fireplace like a cruel joke. What do we do now? I asked. Rachel's voice was steady. We leave. The house was quiet when we left. No screaming, no slammed doors. Just the eerie kind of stillness that settles in after the final blow has been dealt. Rachel packed quickly, methodically. A single duffel bag. A few essentials. I didn't pack anything at all. I just walked. Like a man stepping away from a wreck. Not trying to salvage anything. Just trying to get as far from the flames as possible. My wife didn't come downstairs. She didn't have to. We both knew it was over. Not just the marriage, but everything it stood for. The years of effort, the illusion of partnership, the quiet hope that maybe someday, things would change. They didn't. And now there was nothing left to say. Rachel slid into the passenger seat of her car and looked at me as I shut the door behind us. Her face was unreadable, equal parts grief and steel. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't reach for hers. We drove in silence for a long time. Only when we were miles away, when the house was a memory shrinking in the rear view, did she finally speak. So that's it then. I nodded. Are you okay? She asked. I didn't answer right away. My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been ripped out. I don't know, I said finally. I feel free. And guilty. And completely lost. Rachel looked out the window. Yeah, me too. We stopped at a motel just off the highway. One of those rundown places that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't symbolic. It was just where we landed when there was nowhere else to go. She showered first. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands like they might hold some answer. When she emerged, hair wet, wearing a shirt that wasn't mine for once, she looked younger. Tired, but lighter. I don't regret it, she said softly. I looked up. Any of it? I asked. She walked over, sat beside me. Her knee brushed mine. I regret how it happened, she said. But not you. Never you. Her hand slid into mine. I don't want to sneak anymore. I don't want to be a secret. I want a real chance with you. Messy, broken, whatever it is. I want it. I turned to face her, really face her. And for the first time, I saw her not as my wife's sister, not as the forbidden escape, but as a woman standing in the fallout beside me, scarred, but still choosing me anyway. I want that too, I said. But it won't be easy. No, she said. It won't. The days that followed were quiet. No fireworks, no grand declarations. Just us, slowly stitching a life together from the pieces we carried. I didn't go back for my things. My wife didn't reach out, but the silence was louder than any words. News traveled quickly. Within a week, I was branded the villain in most circles. Friends stopped returning texts. Family dinners got canceled. Rachel's parents refused to speak to her. My own sister called and said, "I love you, but I can't support this." We didn't fight it. We just let it fall. Because for once, we weren't hiding anymore. We rented a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. 2 rooms. Thin walls. Second-hand furniture. But it was ours. And in the quiet moments, when we sat on the couch drinking wine from mugs, or when I caught her smiling to herself while brushing her hair, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not bliss. Not excitement. Just the stillness that comes when you're no longer pretending. But the guilt never vanished completely. I still saw my wife in dreams sometimes. The old version of her, before the walls went up, before we forgot how to reach each other. And sometimes I wondered, if I'd tried harder, if I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd fought instead of withdrawing, would we have ended up here? But then I'd roll over, and Rachel would be there beside me, breathing soft and even, her leg draped over mine. And I'd remember what it felt like to be chosen. Not tolerated. Not ignored. Chosen. We didn't rush into declarations. There was no "I love you" that first month. But one night, as we sat on the balcony watching a thunderstorm roll in, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You're the first man I've ever felt safe with." And that hit me harder than any confession of love. Because love can be loud and chaotic. But safety? That's earned. That's real. It's been 6 months now. We're still figuring it out. People still whisper. Some doors remain closed. Holidays are tense. But we laugh again. We fight sometimes, too, about dishes, bills, how she always leaves the toothpaste cap off. But when I reach for her, she reaches back. When I speak, she listens. When I hurt, she sees it. And that's all I ever wanted. The cost was high. A marriage. A family. A version of myself I'll never get back. But in the ashes, something new was born. Not perfect, not pure, but honest. The guest room, once my exile, became the tunnel through which I crawled out of a dead life. And on the other side of betrayal, of heartbreak, of desire twisted into something more, I found her. And maybe, just maybe, I found me again too.